Hi everyone. Today I really wanted to swatch out some of these watercolours that I bought whilst I was in Japan. So these are the Harmonia Granulating Watercolours by Kusakabe. I can't remember exactly how much they cost me, but looking at the website for one of the stores that I went to whilst I was in Japan, I didn't actually buy these from that store, but they are around like $7 or $8 Australian dollars each, I believe. Though I do have the feeling that I did pay quite a bit more at the small stores that I did buy these ones from. There are 24 colours in this set and I bought 6 of them in total. They do actually sell them as a set at some stores I saw online when I was looking up more information for this video. Unfortunately I didn't see them anywhere because I think that would have been pretty cool to get all the colours because some of them look amazing. Also, from what I could see on Sakaido's website, that in January they did release 12 new colours, and only one of the colours that I got is one of the new ones, but we'll talk through all of them as they're swatched. Stick around for after swatches where I will discuss possible dupes that you can make for these colours if you really like them but can't get them. The first colour is Dusk Sky. This is a translucent colour and has a light fastness rating of 5 stars. This colour is made up of 3 different pigments: PB29, which is ultramarine blue, PG18, which is often viridian, and P073, which is pyrrole orange. I've tried to make the colours on the screen represent the colours as accurately as possible from when I filmed them. So these swatches were done during nighttime, so I have a few lights down to try and make the lighting alright, and then you'll also see the swatches that I took photos and filmed as well during daylight hours, so in natural lighting. I'm doing the swatches on a old pad of Archer's 100% cotton medium watercolour paper. I don't know how old this pad is, but my grandmother gave it to me recently because she used to be a painter, and it was really lovely to paint on. It's just what I expect from a high quality watercolour paper, so I don't know if they've changed their watercolour paper since, but I did really like this one. This colour is this lovely moody purple, but the ultramarine blue really does settle into the grain or the texture of the watercolour paper. You could see when I kind of flooded the watercolour a bit that it really separated, like the blue really separated a lot, and I could imagine how intense this would look on a rough tooth. The next colour is Fog Ash. This is a transparent colour and has a light fast rating of 5 stars. It is another 3 pigment colour, and that has PB29, like the other one, which is ultramarine blue, PG19, which is cobalt green pale, and PBK7, which is lamp black. It can also be known as ivory, sepia, or carbon black. That said though, some brands will use different pigments for black shades. So for example, Daniel Smith uses PBK6 for their lamp black. I am definitely someone who is drawn to moody, grungy kind of colours, and so you'll kind of see this for most of these colours that they do kind of fit that vibe. This colour is really gorgeous and makes me think of like a moody, drizzly night sky in like a cityscape or something. The PG19 pigment that is used in this, which is the cobalt green pale, doesn't seem to be a super well used colour, or should I say commonly used pigment by other brands, especially in multiple mixes. So I think Daniel Smith have a cobalt green pale if I'm correct, but I couldn't see many other multi-pigment watercolours that did use this pigment in it. Cobalt green pale is a granulating pigment. That said though, I couldn't really see it separate from the rest of the paint, like into the tooth of the paper or anything like that. More so, I think it might have bound more with the black pigment, so the PBK7, because I could see that blue settling into the tooth of the paper, but I can't really pick out the cobalt green pale on the paper. There is actually also a bit of a pinkish warmth to this colour when it dries down, which you can see in the swatches, especially that middle swatch, so that kind of really flooded colour where I dropped the paint into the water. I'm not sure where that pinkish colour comes from though, but overall, gorgeous colour, granulates amazingly. Our next colour is Castle Green. This one has a light fastness rating of 5 stars and is a translucent colour. This colour is made up of just two pigments, and that is PB15-3, which is a phthalo blue green shade, and it's also made up of PBR7, which is brown iron oxide, it's a very versatile pigment, so colours like burnt sienna and raw umber are all made up of that pigment. Many earth tones are used making that pigment, and they give off various shades and hues, and we'll talk about that more when we discuss dupes. This green is just absolutely lovely. It gives off such an organic feel, and the granulation is gorgeous. You do have some kind of darker green parts of the pigment mix that settle into the tooth of the paper, and then the brown iron oxide is just gorgeous when it slightly separates from it, and you'll see that when we do flood it on this swatch here that I just did, it does separate a lot more from the green pigment, or the phthalo blue green shade. And I just have to say, this colour is, it's just so beautiful and lovely. As I said before, the best way I can describe it is it just feels really organic. This would be amazing in landscapes, anything that is foresty, mossy. It's a phenomenal colour and I am obsessed with it. What makes it even better is that I think I got a pretty spot on dupe for this colour, mixing two paints from my own palette, and so if you guys love this and you have the same paints that I do, then you might be able to mix it yourself. The next colour that I'm swatching is Raven Butler, and I do not know what I was expecting from this paint, but it exceeded all expectations. I'm obsessed. This is an amazing colour, and you'll have to see the swatches. So Raven Butler is a transparent colour, and it has a light fastness rating of 5 stars. It is made up of 3 pigments, this one, and I found this one quite interesting because one of the pigments is PBK11, which is Mars Black, and the other one is PBK7, which is Lamp Black. The third colour that we have is PB36, which is Cobalt Chromite. Now, PB36 is often a pigment used alone to make cerulean blues, as well as your cobalt blues and turquoises. You can see where the blue does separate from the other pigments on the palette, but it did not show up on the paper. That is not a complaint from me at all though. This colour gives off a dark mountainscape in the coldest, snowiest of winters, and the granulation is just so gorgeous, and what an amazing texture. The fifth and second last colour that I got is Witch Bordeaux, and this colour definitely follows my moody theme so far of the palette, and this colour has a light fastness rating of 4 stars, which is lower than all the other ones which were at 5 stars. It is a transparent watercolour, and it is made up of 2 pigments, PB29, which is our ultramarine blue, which was also in Fog Ash and Dusk Sky, and the second pigment is PR179, which is Perylene Maroon. I love all of the Perylene colours. You might not be surprised because they are such moody colours, but this is such a lovely mixture. The ultramarine blue really neutralises that maroon a little bit, and it just creates such a interesting reddish kind of shade. I don't even know how to explain it. It's not rust, but the granulation and the separation of the pigments is really lovely on the paper. When this paint dries down, the way that the ultramarine blue has settled into the texture of the paper is absolutely amazing. It makes the paint look so dimensional, like 3-dimensional, and it's got so much depth to it, and it actually looks like it looks textured. Sunrise Blossom is the final colour that I bought, And this colour is transparent. It has a light fastness rating of 5 stars and it is a 2 pigment colour. The pigments for this colour are PV19, which is quinacridone rose or red, depending on where you get it, and PV29, which is ultramarine blue again, so that one has shown up in 4 of these 6 colours. Now this colour does kind of break the moody theme of this palette, nonetheless it is an amazing colour. And when I actually did look at the pigments, I wasn't surprised that I was drawn to this colour because it is the same 2 colours used in a Daniel Smith paint that I have always had an absolute crush on, and we'll talk about that more when we look at different dupes. This colour offers such a vibrant, saturated purple with the ultramarine blue settling slightly into the tooth of the paper, which gives it a lovely depth and variation. When you do shear this colour out with some water, it gives you a lovely whimsical kind of purple. Like I could see this in a fantasy kind of sky sunset or something like that. It is really lovely all round. When you do flood it again, those pigments really separate nicely, and it also, when I did flood it, it gave me a really vibrant ring around the bleed of the water when it dried down. If you are interested in checking out these paints or any of the ones from other brands that I swatch next as we look at some dupes, you can find them linked in the video description below. Alright, so it is now dupe time. I could not necessarily dupe all of these colours, and that said, I primarily only have the Daniel Smith watercolours and the Holbein watercolours, so there are so many brands out there that I don't have. I also have to give a shout out to Otto Kano, who's also a YouTuber, but I did use their, I think it's like their pigment directory on their website, which shows you, you can look up like a pigment and it will show you which brands have that pigment used in their watercolours. It was amazing, so easy to use, so easy to navigate, so check that out if you're interested. When I was swatching Dusk Sky, I thought that it really reminded me a lot of Moonglow from Daniel Smith, and when I did look into it, I realised that Dusk Sky actually is made up of the same pigments as Shadow Violet, which is another colour from Daniel Smith that is quite similar to Moonglow. Now, just because they are made up of the same pigments doesn't mean they will be the exact same. There could be different ratios, and even just different pigment suppliers can give a pigment a complete different colour. Now, I do not have Shadow Violet in my collection, but I do have Moonglow, and so I did a little swatch of that so we could kind of compare how it is and isn't similar. And that pan there is just a half pan that I put some Moonglow in from the tube and let dry down so I could keep it in a palette. Sorry about that being out of focus, but that will focus back in just a second. Moonglow and Dusk Sky are very similar in value, however there is quite a variation where Moonglow is kind of more of a blue purple and Dusk Sky really leans more towards that warm purple. They are both 3 pigment colours and both have PB29, ultramarine blue, and PG18 Viridian in them, but where Dusk Sky has PO73, which is Pyrrole Orange, Moonglow has PR177, which is Anthraquinone Red. One thing that is worth noting though is that Moonglow directly out of the tube actually was a little more purple than it was from my pan, so maybe it is worth me testing out to see if the pigments have settled differently because I've let them dry in a pan. Initially I thought that for Fog Ash that maybe a Payne's Grey might give a similar kind of option. Now, Payne's Greys amongst different brands have so much variation between looking really neutral kind of in tint to being really blue and almost indigo to some being maybe a little more green tone. So I did swatch my Payne's Grey that I have, which is a Holbein one. The Holbein Payne's Grey was just far too much of a kind of blackish blue and lacked that green, I don't know, that green blue, that cobalt green pale that was in this colour of Fog Ash, so it was not a dupe. I also did a swatch of a watercolour that I made myself, which was part of my set that I made in collaboration with Fine Liner Nerd. So this colour is called Castle Walls, and it is a 3 pigment colour that has a black pigment, a blue pigment and a red pigment. Whilst Castle Walls does have some nice granulation, and obviously I made it, I think it's a lovely colour, it didn't work as a dupe for Fog Ash, so they were the 2 options that I tried, but I also did look online to see if I could find anything that might be a comparison. The 2 colours that I did kind of come up with from looking online at swatches were both Schmincke colours, and that was Glacier Black and Deep Sea Black. Now the swatches that I looked at were, I guess, inconsistent amongst whoever's swatched them, because everyone's got different camera settings and different lighting when they do take photos of swatches and different papers and all of that sort of stuff. So I couldn't guarantee that these would be a dupe, but it could be an option for someone to look into if they did really like the look of this paint here. Castle Green is that 2 pigment colour, with one of those pigments being PBR7, as I said earlier, which is brown iron oxide, and a pigment that is used in many different colours. So I do a swatch of Raw Umber by Daniel Smith and Raw Sienna by Daniel Smith to show you a comparison, because both of these colours are made with the pigment PBR7. The other pigment is PB153, which is a phthalo blue green shade, and I have the Daniel Smith version of that. So what I'm going to do is swatch all those colours and then mix them together so you can see the Raw Umber and the Raw Sienna both mixed with the phthalo blue green shade to see how it impacts the colour differently, because we don't know what PBR7 or kind of what shade of PBR7 is used in Kusakaze's Castle Green. And just like with Moonglow, I had previously put both of these colours into, actually all 3 of these colours into half pans to put into one of my palettes, so I'm just going directly from the half pan to swatch them out for you. As you can see, there is such a huge difference between these 2 different colours, even though they are both PBR7. From looking at it immediately, I could kind of tell that we were more so leaning towards a Raw Sienna kind of shade of PBR7 that was mixed with the phthalo blue green shade to make the colour Castle Green. Now, Daniel Smith does have a colour called Cascade Green, which does have the same pigments used. I do think though, looking at swatches of that, it might be a similar brown iron oxide that is used, but it does lean a lot more blue just from the swatches that I see. Like the green color leans a lot more to kind of the blue end of the spectrum, so it could be the exact same pigments used, but the ratio is just different. I'm not sure, but it is similar, but it's also different. I probably wouldn't use it as an exact dupe. Now I know what you're thinking, that looks exactly like a rabbit, and stick around to the end for me to try and turn that into a masterpiece, that little colour swatch, but here is the comparison. So I do think that Raw Sienna was a much more likely match with the phthalo blue green shade than something like the Raw Umber would have been. So Raven's Butler was the 3 pigment colour that was made up of 2 different black pigments, PBK11 and PBK7, as well as Cobalt Chromite, which is PB36. I could not find a exact match for the pigments, and I do feel like you could likely find something similar. I know that Daniel Smith have a lot of shades that are kind of your different blacks that lean either warm or cool and kind of towards different colours. That's not to say that another brand couldn't have something really similar as well. That's just the brand that I'm more familiar with. I did do a swatch of Neutral Tint by Holbein out of curiosity to see if it would be somewhat of a comparison. Now this is not a granulating colour though, so it does lay down very differently, but it is a lot more blue than the Raven's Butler is, and it's almost, I think, kind of leans almost towards an indigo, maybe not as blue an indigo, but it was very blue. I didn't actually think it was that much of a neutral colour. I did actually think that My Colour Castle Walls was a much closer match to Raven Butler, though it still leaned a bit more blue and it didn't granulate the way that Raven Butler did. Witch Bordeaux is made up of two pigments, being PB29, so our ultramarine blue, and PR179, which is Perylene Maroon. I absolutely love all the Perylene colours, and for this one I do have a ultramarine blue, which is Daniel Smith's one, and I also have a Perylene Maroon from Holbein, so I did lay both of those colours down and then I mixed them together to see if we could create something similar to Witch Bordeaux. If you have both of these colours in your watercolour collection, now obviously I can only speak for the brands that I've used, but if you do have both of these colours in your watercolour collection, I could pretty confidently say you can probably mix a colour very similar to Witch Bordeaux, because when I mix these two together, I got something super similar. So I think this is definitely something that could be mixed on a palette if it's a colour that you love, and I recommend you guys try it. It is a lovely colour. It is, as I said earlier, like during the swatch, it's so dimensional and gives off so much texture, and I think it would be great and really easy to mix actually as well. In regards to out of the tube dupes though, I couldn't find any brands that had the same two pigments mixed together, nor could I find anything that I thought might have a really similar kind of, I guess, overall finish. So if you were wanting to dupe these, your best bet might be to get the two pigments alone, as I have them, and just mix them yourself on the palette. Sunrise Blossom is a mixture of PB19, Quinacridone Rose, and PB29 Ultramarine Blue, and I didn't realise this when I purchased it, but it is the same pigments used in the Daniel Smith colour Rose of Ultramarine, which I have always thought is such a gorgeous colour but have never actually purchased. I have, however, actually tried to dupe this colour myself with pigments that I have, making my own watercolours. So I do have PB19 and PB29 in pigments, and so sometimes I mull my own watercolours, and I have these two pans. I thought one of them was it and one of them wasn't it. One of them does say new on them, and then I'm assuming the other one's the older one. I can't figure out, I can see a slight difference, but I can't actually figure out what the difference is here. I did pull out my recipe book where I write down like all the different pigment ratios and the amount of binder that I put in when I make watercolors. I'm starting to wonder if this new one maybe was just mulled for a different time frame or has a different amount of binder, but I do think these are both, I think it's a 50-50 ratio of the pigments to create this color. If not, and these two do have a different ratio, I'd say the one that I'm swatching now likely has just a little bit more of PB29 in it than the other one does. Here is a sneak peek into my book of recipes for when I make my own watercolors. I really don't like the paper of this book, but I just use it to kind of write down recipes and always swatch on better quality paper. I was just trying to figure out which pan was which, and I'm still not 100% sure, but I do think the top swatch that I did, and you'll see it in comparison in a second, is a pretty close match to the Sunrise Blossom. I would be interested to see if I did a kind of flood similarly to the one that I did when I swatched Sunrise Blossom of the paints that I made, if you'd kind of get that similar separation. Overall, these colours were all absolutely really gorgeous. I think some of them would be absolutely amazing for landscape painting. I do really, now that I look at the website, all their other colours, wish I'd gotten some more, but I might actually try and see if I can dupe some with my own pigments that I have and make my own paint, so let me know if you'd be interested in that. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up and follow me if you'd like to, and all my social medias are linked down below. Other than that, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you all have a lovely day. you.